And welcome, degenerates, to a Degenerate Friday edition of Bury Your Bookie. I'm Jeff DeForest. We're very happy to have you guys with us as we have a lot of things on the horizon here. The postseason coming up in both the NBA and the National Hockey League. Some real juicy matchups in the first round and a lot of great betting opportunities. And of course, we finish off the qualifications for the actual field of 8 teams in both the Eastern and Western Conference tonight in the National Basketball Association with the vaunted play-in games. As you have, well, the people are speaking. They're in the process of speaking right now. The Miami Heat game against the Atlanta Hawks. The Heat coming off what looked like as efficient an effort as they've had all season against the Chicago Bulls, who they routinely beat like a drum. That's 3 straight years they've knocked them out of the postseason in one of these kind of contests. And then you have the Atlanta Hawks, who looked abysmal at best and almost looked like they were in tank mode against the Orlando Magic. And now the Hawks host the Heat for the right to go on and play the Cavaliers. And in the Western Conference, the Dallas Mavericks, the big question is Ja Morant. Will he or will he not play? If he doesn't, certainly the 6 points with the Mavs, I don't know if that's going to stay there as we welcome the professor into the program. And Professor, I don't know. You're not a big NBA guy. I know we discussed this a little bit earlier on another show where you'll take a small interest in the NBA, not because you're embracing NBA basketball, but because you simply can't stand watching Major League Baseball. Is that the rationale?
That's accurate. Yes. Again, I live in we live in South Florida. You know, our baseball television is the Florida Marlins.
Yeah,
Like, yeah. I mean, I don't know
not
if you've
much.
ever. I don't know if how many listeners out there have ever tried to watch a Florida Marlins game, but man, I mean, you're better off, trying to watch little kid cartoons on YouTube than the Marlins game and have it keep your attention. Like, there's nothing worse than watching a Florida Marlins game on television.
It's kind of crazy. They've even switched the announcing team up this year, where they went with a guy that we knew who he was the guy that when you were out at 6 in the morning at spring training trying to set up a radio show and you didn't have an extension cord, they called this guy and said, "Hey, Kyle, come get the cord." Now, I respect the fact in some ways that an organization would reward a guy from coming from the bottom
As
with
do I, honestly.
his rise to the television play-by-play job. But you have to think that maybe the guy that they replaced, what was another cost-cutting measure? I don't know. It's not a particularly flattering way to put it. We wish this guy all the success in the world as the announcer, but he was on the radio, and now all of a sudden he's like the number one TV guy, and guys that had some level, or at least some resume, not that they were great or bad or
I'm trying to remember what was the year where it was Hutton and was it Joe Angel?
yeah.
And they kept switching them on and off TV and radio. And like one would do the radio and one would do the TV, and then they'd switch back in like the fourth inning and then like switch again in the seventh
That
inning. It
might have
was
been Joe Angel and Dave
bizarre.
O'Brien. Yeah,
Okay.
the great
Yeah,
Dave
I did.
O'Brien.
I remember that with like the combined the jobs. It was like,
Yeah,
okay, you do the first three innings on radio, and then you switch to TV, and then you switch
right.
back to. It's a
Saving money.
very Marlins thing to do. Yes.
Well, they fired their mascot at one point and replaced him. The mascot remained the same, but the guy inside the suit changed because it was costing them too much money to pay the guy to.
You're not giving any sympathy for me.
Oh no, you hate mascots, so that's for sure. But all right, so you're finding it unwatchable Major League Baseball. There would be many people that would agree with you. Look, I was a diehard guy. Grew up. It was the American and national pastime, and you were consumed with baseball. Football was just a little pleasant diversion between the time the World Series ended and pitchers and catchers reported in February. And that interest I don't share anymore. And as much as I still enjoy the game, the current version of it. Well, when you have to legislate certain defensive strategies out of the game and
Right.
mandate that, listen, I mean, back in the day when you were inventing and manufacturing fields in areas that weren't geographically complicit with putting a baseball field in, like a sidewalk in Brooklyn. It was one thing to have everybody play on one side of the field, but you still needed to protect the other side because the guy might hit one the other way. The fact that guys can't hit, I don't see how you can dictate to a defense, hey, listen, you have to play over there because our guys are inept at hitting the ball. I mean, the game is definitely
Well,
diminished.
not only that, the rule everybody hates, this stupid extra innings rule where they
Yeah,
start a guy on second base. And I haven't met a single person who thinks this is a good idea. and they've kept it for I don't know, what is it, third or fourth year now. Um, you've seen Moneyball, right? The movie, Brad
Yeah.
Pitt. You know the scene where they're in there with all the scouts and like they're Brad Pitt's like, the way you're doing this is old and stupid. Nobody, no, you know, this is the way you build a team now with math and with Jonah Hill and blah blah. He gets on base, blah blah. Like that, the part they miss it is a guy and go, okay, yeah, all this works and you win baseball games, but nobody will watch because it is so boring.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to watch, you know, nine relievers share a ball game. Nobody wants to watch, you know, guys draw walks and then get solo home runs. That was what they needed. Is like, okay, you'll win ball games if you do this, but nobody except retired white guys will watch this game because it's so boring.
Yeah. When you pan the crowd at a baseball game, now it's not uncommon at all stadiums, but everybody is on their cell phone. And they're not just on their cell phone, glancing at it as they're watching the game. They're just buried in it, even behind home plate, where a guy could be calling balls and strikes. The fans appear to be disinterested and distanced from what's actually going on the field. Because, as you say, I mean, they did a lot to try and improve the pace of the game, and it's still, at a
Again,
very pedantic, slow pace.
some of this is cultural, and let's be
Yeah,
honest, in attention deficit America,
right.
baseball was never going to be a great fit. Um, but I think a lot of it is just the style and strategy and the way the game is played. All the strikeouts, deciding, you know, that this is and again, I'm not even trying to argue it. You know, if you're a Bill James person or a sabermetrics person, I get it, and I get that it is a, you know, a efficient way to win baseball games, but it is just freaking unwatchable. Like it is
They can get
so
there,
boring.
no doubt. Yeah. Yeah, you have plenty of time to turn away and come back and find out that nothing actually
And
transpired.
honestly, you're like sitting there and you're like, you know what? I didn't realize it. Like the hit and run was as exciting as it actually is. I wasn't realize like all these little things, these little intricacies. I hate to admit it because PC is like one of my best friends. PC we talk about on the show is just like Mr. Old School baseball
Oh
guy.
yeah, he's a diehard.
You gotta throw it, guys, for this respect, and like, you know, if you're turning double and he comes in, all the little old school crap. And like I didn't realize he was correct. Like these are fundamental part of the games that made the game so much more watchable and exciting than it turns out. I mean, again, I never knew that like defense in baseball was actually like a crucial point of watching the game and making the game watchable. Because now that it's just become strikeout and solo home run derby, like the game is, the sport is totally untranslatable to the audience.
It's amazing they make the plays they do because you do see incredible defensive plays every day in Major League Baseball. Plays that you fantasized about making when you were a kid playing any form of hybrid version of the game or baseball itself. And because the ball's not in action, I mean, you remember how boring it was standing out there in right field and
Yeah.
there's no balls in play, and then finally a pop up comes your way, and you're like seeing it in triplicate because you haven't seen any action for the first 7.5 innings of the ball game. So it's kind of crazy. All right, we want to get into some picks, and then you had a great big board today for the people, which I hope people are enjoying that here on Bury Your Bookie because this was appropriate. It really was. I mean, a week where you're going through a little bit of a transition. Yeah, you did have some games of interest. I don't know. You're not a big fan of the playing games, which I don't know. I mean, do you buy into a quick betting trend? Heat in this game tonight against the Hawks started out as 1.5 point dogs. Now they're favored by a point. Would that be any kind of indicator to you, or is that not enough of a move in
I
the
mean, it would be
NBA?
against the trend, right? Because the trend is the number 10 seed never
Never makes
advances.
right,
I mean, but I think any trend you're talking about in the play-in, the sample size is so small that
right.
I don't know that you can actually qualify it as a trend. Um, I got to be honest, having watched a fair amount of the Miami Heat, they're so inconsistent, not just game to game, but quarter to quarter. I mean, how many times have we seen the Heat this year, particularly against, you know, some of the premier teams where they'll look brilliant for a quarter or a half and then come out in the third quarter and then lose the third quarter by 20 points? I mean,
And fourth quarter collapses were
yeah.
almost a matter of routine for a long portion of the season.
I would be, and it's funny because I don't get involved, but I did get involved the other night because I thought Memphis, I thought they were getting 7 by tip off. I was like, that's
Yeah.
way too many. And, turned out to be a fairly fortunate cover, but a cover nonetheless. But no, I don't see a lot in either of these games. I'll wait for the rest of the playoffs to really kick in before I dabble again in
Yeah.
the
John
NBA.
Morant, questionable for tonight. And supposedly a game time decision. Now, without him, if you got down at +6 with the Dallas Mavericks, you're probably feeling pretty comfortable if you don't see this guy coming out. If he's in street clothes and you have 6 points, I mean, we've seen stranger things happen, but you would have to feel pretty good about
You would.
Dallas the way they performed, even without Kyrie Irving in the lineup. All right, Australian rules football. Let's get to some selections here. You crushed it last week with Australian rules football and the UFL. I believe
Yeah, we're
undefeated in the program.
going right back against the same team last week. We took Geelong, no, excuse me, Essendon over Melbourne last week. We're laying a point and a half. Essendon won by 40. And we're going to do the same thing this week with Fremantle, who is also playing Melbourne. Now, they're laying a stiffer number here, and that's because Fremantle's having a better year than Essendon did. They're laying 16 and a half. But I feel like they're a very solid spot. Again, Melbourne serious offensive deficit in a sport where the winner routinely scores 90 or 100 points. Melbourne scoring 50 and 60 a game. Fremantle more in the standard mode there. So we're going to pick on Melbourne once again. It's an 11:20 start tonight. That'd be Friday night Eastern time zone. American 11:20 p.m. We're going to take Fremantle. Actually, number just went up. I'm now showing it at 17 and a half, not 16 and a half. Either way, we still like Fremantle to cruise in this one and come home with a victory over a winless Melbourne team. So the Dockers, Fremantle is our pick in Aussie rules football, and we will continue to pick on Melbourne probably throughout the course of the season because if you're offensively incompetent in that sport, it's a big problem.
How widespread do you think the degenerate action is on Australian rules football throughout the world outside of Australia itself?
As I told you in an early show, I think it's me. Like I
You're the only other guy betting this crap.
maybe Russell Crowe. Like if he's not in Australia,
Yeah.
maybe Mel Gibson. I don't know. I mean, I
Rod
feel like
Laver, is he sending it in
yeah, I
on the
feel like
phone?
it's me and Aussie expats, and that's it.
Now,
Like
is there a limit to how much you can wager on a
does
game?
does Pat Cash live outside of Australia? Wasn't he like a big coach there for a while? Where
He
like
was a top player, Pat Cash.
I know he had a playing career, but I seem to remember after he was a player, he was a big
Oh,
coach.
he might have been, yeah,
Yeah,
a player
they
coach.
had
Yeah.
some big name uh,
Sure.
players, and then I can't remember the name. What was the guy who was like the last serve and volley player in male tennis who played just strictly serve and volley? I don't know if he ever won a major, but
Edberg?
no, not Edberg. He was an Aussie. He was a Philippoussis.
Oh, yeah, Mark Philippoussis.
Yeah.
Good
Anyway,
call.
like I feel like those. It's just me and those
He was
guys.
also on The Bachelor, I think,
Like
Philippoussis.
me and Aussie tennis players who aren't living in Australia because they're
Only
traveling
guys
the
betting
world
this stuff.
coaching. Yeah.
All right, and then you had a UFL theory also again, and we were commenting earlier. Nobody in the stands for these games. Strictly, it's being done as almost a studio event for TV. Are people
I
that
wouldn't say almost. I'd say it's 100% strictly
are we that
television
star for
content.
football that this thing has a chance to succeed, or is it counting on succeeding on guys that are getting involved in the
That's a really interesting question. I I don't know what the television ratings are. Is America that star for football? I am, so I
yeah?
can't. You know, again, Major League Baseball to me is completely unwatchable. And honestly, again, there's a sliding scale of how watchable minor league football has been over the years. This, particularly USFL going into the UFL, is far and away the most watchable version I have seen,
Oh, okay.
unless you were super into the Arena League. Now, the Arena League to me is different enough that it's basically a whole different sport with the smaller rosters on the field and the indoor environment. Small, I don't really count that. Um, but you go back through the years, and I guess you could say it was actually the USFL back in the early '80s. But that was, I mean, the USFL threw out enough money that they were getting legitimate talent. But outside of that, I think this is the most watchable version I've seen. Is it great football? No, it's not. It's exactly what you'd expect. The quarterback position is not nearly what it is at the NFL level. And the offensive lines are not nearly what they are at the NFL. So it's a defensive dominated sport. And that's part of our handicapping theory on this is that teams just struggle offensively because, look, you and I have called some minor league games and we've been around. There's just a lot more dudes out there on the street who are close to being like an NFL defensive end or an NFL linebacker. And there's basically nobody who's qualified to be an NFL offensive lineman who isn't actually in the NFL.
Yeah.
You just don't see 330-pound dudes who can, keep pace with these athletes, around the edges and pass protection. On like if you have NFL left tackle ability, you're playing in the
You're in the
NFL.
NFL, yeah.
You may not be starting, you may be like the third teamer, but if you have even the rough capability, you're on an NFL roster because there
Big
just ain't
shortage of
that
these
many of
players.
those dudes around it.
Yeah.
That plays into our handicapping theory. Lean heavily underdog because it's tough for teams to score. It's tough for teams to execute in the red zone. And, when you can catch a line above a field goal, be more inclined to take it, which is what we're doing tonight, taking the Michigan Panthers plus 7.5 against the Memphis Showboats. Excuse me, taking Memphis plus 7.5 over the Michigan Panthers. And anytime you see where you can get north of a touchdown in this particular league, I say take it because you very rarely see, a result that finishes above a touchdown.
How many teams are in this league? 8?
Correct.
Okay. All right. And when are they playing the majority of their games? On a Saturday?
Saturday and Sunday afternoons, but this year they've gone with a Friday night package, which airs on Fox.
All right. And you found this to be a favorable betting spot, which is very, very interesting.
Again, it may be,
Well-founded theories.
I'm not going to lie, it may be just blind luck and limited, scope of results. Again, limited sample size. But yes, much like Aussie rules football, and I don't claim I'm actually good at Aussie rules football. There's a very good chance I've just been phenomenally lucky with it. But, as long as it's working, roll with the
Hey,
results, right?
you found the right solution.
Honestly, you're a horse guy. It's not different than like the rare horse guys you met who bet jockeys instead of horses.
Yeah.
But if it works out for you, why mess with the system,
Our good friend Jersey Kyle betting on Joe Bravo. Even when he was as much of
Again.
a shot fighter as he possibly could be, and still cashing big tickets with the occasional win that he was able to score on, usually at a big price. All right, so we have some selections here. Oddball Sports, UFL, a little off the beaten path, Australian rules football. You did come up with a brilliant dissertation this morning, the big board that you ran on our Defo show, which you can catch on Bleacher Brothers and also on South Florida Live. Runs 8 to 9 in the morning, but is up there all day long in this new age of having everything archived. And it was great because I was thinking, wow, this is a weird, slow week in sports in some ways. We did have some things to be decided, but everybody's waiting for the playoffs and hoping to kind of get revitalized in their interest in basketball and football and hockey as a postseason.
It's a weird little off week, particularly when there's low stakes in the NHL and NBA because like everybody's gearing up for the. I mean, sometimes there's like that last place race, although the NBA has kind of eliminated that with the play-in, and those play-in games are kind of rough to watch. To be perfectly honest,
so far, yeah.
Usually because much like the Chicago Bulls, there's one team that just like clearly doesn't care or like there's one team or maybe one in each conference who's really like actively waiting to play some golf the next day or waiting to go fishing because they pretty much show they have no interest in playing a playoff series. But yeah, so it ends up being like this weird little bye week, kind of for the world. Again, unless you're super into Major League Baseball, which I personally find impossible to be.
All right, you found some substance to the news cycle this week, so let's roll it by the people here on Bury Your Bookie. The big board for this week from the professor. ladies and gentlemen. Now, if you're just on audio, we'll try and guide you through it because there are graphics associated with this. The week in sports when there's no good sports. Here we go.
And
Number
so that
five.
is our topic this week. And that takes us to number 5, which is the Phoenix Suns lose a coach and Defo gains a new hero. This
This is very much my philosophy, Professor.
Phoenix Suns coach Mike Budenholzer, who was fired after 1 year with the Phoenix Suns. And that means the Phoenix Suns owe Mike Budenholzer $40 million to not work for the next 3 years. Now, that by itself is impressive. But when you factor in the fact that the Milwaukee Bucks are also paying Mike Budenholzer $16 million to not work for the next 2 years, that means if Mike Budenholzer just does not coach until 2029, he will collect $56 million for not working for the next 3 years. As I said in an earlier show, if Defo were found to start a religion like Scientology, Mike Budenholzer would be the god of
He is
Defoe's
my
new
God.
religion
Yeah,
because he's getting paid $56 million to do nothing for the next
absolutely
3 years.
nothing. Encouraged to do nothing. And that was always my stated dream in the business was sign a big, fat, guaranteed 5-year contract and get fired on day number one.
Right? I mean, isn't
And the
this
next 4
everybody's
years in the 364 on the beach. Be great.
Isn't this everybody's dream to
Yeah.
get paid not to work, to get paid to just sit at
56
home?
million for Budenholzer. Get the hell out of here. He backed into a title one year and had like incredible talent that he was able to accomplish that with. And Phoenix is a great place to land. I mean, they will pay you into perpetuity to come in there and coach their team for a year. They must be forking over a ton to Frank Vogel also, who was there for one season. I'm not sure if they owed Monty Williams any money when he was canned after being coach of the year. So interesting stuff. That's number 5. All right. And he would be my role model just because of that. I mean, getting paid to do nothing is brilliant. Number 4.
Number 4 is Ryan Day's wife is a liar or he has a medical condition. For those who didn't follow this story, Clay Travis, who's obviously a big name in the world of sports and politics these days, put out a tweet, and I don't know if he specifically called out Ryan Day or if Ryan Day's wife just assumed he was talking about Ryan Day, where Clay Travis said, "You cannot trust a man who dyes his beard," which is followed immediately by Ryan Day's wife claiming Ryan Day has never dyed his beard. Well, we have a picture up. All of you are familiar with it. If Ryan Day does not dye his beard, he needs to go see a doctor because that color of facial hair does not
Yeah,
happen in nature. Like either Ryan, maybe she means that he just rubs shoe polish on his
that's
face
what it
every
looks like.
morning. Maybe he's got that Ron Popeil hair in a can. He bought all of the supply that's left on Earth and just sprays his face every morning. But there's no way you're going to convince anybody that Ryan Day's hair color is actually. In fact, as we said earlier, I thought the reason that J.D. Vance dropped the championship trophy during the ceremony at the White House was because it was so covered in Ryan Day's beard hair goop that it was just slippery and fell out of his hands.
Looks
Like
like the old Gene Katie color that
this
we
is
used
like
to see.
This is like Bill's self's wife coming out and say, "Oh no,
Yeah,
Bill's got very natural, thick, lustrous hair.
he
That's
tugs
not
on
a
it in
wig
the
at
front.
all."
Yeah, he
Like,
Bill Self. Piece or no piece was always the question there, hair piece or not. That's a graphic illustration that something is absolutely wrong. If,
right? Like
Ryan Day is denouncing the idea, and his wife is backing him up that he's not dyeing that hair in the beard. All right, number 4.
again,
Yeah,
that color that doesn't even look like a human being. It looks like some sort of monster in a Star Wars. Like his mouth is just surrounded by blackness.
yeah. I mean, he looks like he was charred in a fire or something. That's number 4. Number 3.
Number 3, in celebration of the upcoming NFL draft this week, we got Donald Trump's scouting report, and it turns out Donald Trump is the exact same size as Seattle Seahawk wide receiver DK Metcalf.
Yeah, if you're
Six
looking at
foot
the
three, 224 pounds. And if you can see the picture of these two side by
yeah,
side, it looks like twins. I mean, very clearly, those are human beings with the exact same body composition there at 6 foot three, 224 pounds.
Trump's
And
an athlete. Yeah, and then what? He
much
gets taller.
Donald Trump's credit, based on the last time Donald Trump turned himself in to face charges in the city of Atlanta and reported his height and weight. Not only has Donald Trump lost 10 pounds in the last couple of weeks, he grew an inch in his mid 70s, which I gotta say, billionaire, 2-time president, married however many times, however many kids. All the most impressive Donald Trump accomplishment is managed to grow an inch in your middle 70s.
Yeah,
Like,
that's impossible.
that's just, I mean, at a time where literally every other human being on earth is getting shorter, Donald Trump is getting taller. I mean, he
Vivid
and Ryan
comparison.
Day should get together between that beard and managing to grow an inch in your 70s. Like, they could share the secret to living to 200 years old.
All right, that's number 3. Number 2.
Number two, and we talked about it on the show, as someone who had Justin Rose, I thought I had a bad Sunday, but the worst person you know had an even worse Sunday watching Bryson DeChambeau fall apart at Augusta. I mean, can you imagine what Buffalo Wild Wings looked like? Clouds of vape smoke floating through the air as every douchebag in America was furiously pounding away at their DraftKings and FanDuel account, trying to hope that Bryson would make a charge down the back nine at Augusta Sunday. And it's really simple. Whoever the worst person you know is, they are a huge Bryson DeChambeau fan. Like, Bryson himself, I'm not a big fan of, but you can say either way. There is no doubt his fan base is composed entirely of the worst people you know.
Yeah.
And like I said, if you think I had it bad losing in the playoff with Justin Rose, imagine the poor waitress at Buffalo Wild Wings, Twin Peaks, or Hooters who had to deal with these people all Sunday as Bryson DeChambeau blew it out over the last 16 after taking the lead early in the final round at Augusta.
All right, let's
Just
roll
it's
out
a
number 1.
horror show.
Yeah, no, great illustration there too. Number 1 on the list.
As you know, on this show, I'm not the most sincere person, but I mean this personally sincere, and that is, man, does the world of football miss Coach Mike Leach. For those who missed this story this week, turns out came out of a source at Mississippi State during his last year as the head coach of Mississippi State football. As a result of the rule change that allowed players to push the pile on short yardage, which of course led most famously to the tush push in the in the NFL. Mike Leach had a counter plan, which was to recruit a little person and then have a running back throw him over the pile and up past the line of scrimmage, which he was talked out of by his assistant coach. For starters, it's Mike Leach. So when he told them about this plan, he didn't say little person. He said midget or dwarf.
Yeah.
And I don't know if Mike Leach saw a movie with dwarf tossing, or he was in Mississippi. Maybe went to a bar where they had dwarf tossing. But that's clearly where Mike Leach got this idea. And I, for one, am personally said, because it's Mike Leach, at some point he would have stopped letting the assistant coaches talk about him, and he would have gone ahead and done this plan. And we would have gotten like the Mississippi State appearance in the Independence Bowl, where 17 players sat out of the ball game, and he managed to find himself a little person to throw over the top on third and short. We miss you, Pirate. We miss you, Coach Leach. We really needed someone to make this vision happen, where the new tush push is to recruit a little person and throw him over the top of the pile. Like Herschel Walker going back in the day, jumping over the top of the pile. Instead of that, just tossing a dwarf
hurdle a guy over
the top of the pile.
Classic.
Can you imagine if you combine that with one of these? Can you imagine if you combine that with one of these 350-pound defensive linemen that they put in at fullback, just having some giant toss a dwarf?
Pete Johnson, just picks them up and hurls them over the line of scrimmage. Professor, we love you, man. Good luck with your plays, and thanks so much as always for being with us.
You have a great one, Defo.
The Professor, ladies and gentlemen. Leach was an innovator. You would have to at least say that. But it was only a matter of time before somebody would come up with it. It's not surprising that he might have been practicing it. I don't know if they have any drone footage of this dwarf bowling that he was executing, but leave it to the professor to scope that out. All right, you guys, good luck over the weekend. We'll see what happens. We start out the playoffs, NBA, NHL. If you don't count the play-in games as part of the playoffs, which I have a tendency to put them in parentheses. So we'll get the full opening round coming up next week. We'll have a lot of analysis on that. Thanks so much for being with us. We'll see you next time on Bury Your Bookie.